and Pierre L'Enfant were in fact Freemasons. Jefferson in particular is commonly placed in the lists of Masonic presidents, including this collection from the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library. Needless to say, Truman himself was a proud Mason. Some believe that modern Masonry denies the membership of Jefferson and L'Enfant to distance itself from the idea of a Masonic conspiracy in America's history.
I mean, I can find you, it's on the internet, there were some Masonic editions of the Bible that list Masonic presidents, and Jefferson is listed. And so they say, aha, we know that Jefferson is a Mason, and you're trying to hide it because he was this awful deist, and you don't want to have an atheistic, non-Christian deist as one of your members. And the answer is no. The people that wrote the Bible, that wrote the supplementary pages for that edition of the Bible, made a mistake.
The only way to prove anyone is a Freemason is to have their initiation records. His certainly are missing.
Some have argued that Jefferson and L'Enfant might have been initiated into Masonry during their time in France. In Paris, the Lodge of the Nine Sisters was a famous French lodge, whose members included Benjamin Franklin, John Paul Jones, and the Marquis de Lafayette. Jefferson and L'Enfant would have certainly been in familiar company.
It's possible for Pierre L'Enfant, as well as Thomas Jefferson, to have belonged to a French Masonic lodge or possibly another Masonic lodge on the continent of Europe. Jefferson was ambassador to France. L'Enfant was himself a Frenchman. Perhaps they belonged to a French lodge. Perhaps the records were lost during the French Revolution or at some other time. Perhaps they also were visited by space aliens and taken to Area 51 in New Mexico and then flown back to their homes. That's a possibility also.
In stark contrast to Dr. Morris's view, Michael Bagent, in his Freemasonry Today, openly refers to Pierre L'Enfant and Thomas Jefferson as Freemasons, as do many Masonic lodges even to this day. Similar opposing views also exist on the writings of men like David Oveson.
Oveson is not writing an anti-Masonic book. Oveson, in the main, has good things to say about Masonry. He's talking about how the builders and the founders of this nation were Freemasons. So, of course, that's going to ring sympathetic bells with any other Freemason.
Among those whose sympathetic bells seem to have been rung is Siegfried Kleinknecht, the former Sovereign Grand Commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, an office believed by many to be the most powerful Masonic office in the United States. Kleinknecht is pictured here next to President Ronald Reagan, when Reagan was made an honorary 33rd degree Mason. This becomes significant when one considers that Kleinknecht wrote the foreword to David Oveson's book. He begins with the words, "as above, so below," saying these words, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, lie at the heart of the Western esoteric tradition. He later refers to the work as a fascinating and well-researched book. We asked Dr. Morris to comment.
Brother Kleinknecht was the one who hired me to work at the Supreme Council as the managing editor of the Scottish Rite Journal. I've known him for over 20 years. I admire him as a Mason, as an administrator. I'm quite impressed at what he's accomplished. We don't happen to see eye to eye on that historical interpretation. But again, I think the important thing is he emphasizes in his introduction, or his foreword, that Oveson may have found an explanation. He doesn't say it is the explanation. Certainly it's an intriguing explanation, but I don't think that there is any historical basis to it.
Of David Oveson's research, Siegfried Kleinknecht writes that recent scholarship demonstrates the undeniable influence of Freemasonry exerted on the American system of government. While Kleinknecht is careful in his suggestion, he goes on to relate Oveson's work with that of 19th century Masonic icon Albert Pike.
Albert Pike is the father, really the father of American Freemasonry.
And I don't know of a greater authority on Scottish Rite Masonry than Albert Pike because he authored it. He's the one who wrote Scottish Rite Masonry, the 32 degrees.
Albert Pike, in his ritual research, suggests that the ceiling of Masonic lodges should be painted with symbolic constellations.
In the foreword to Oveson's book, Kleinknecht comments on Pike's suggestion for a ceiling design. He says, "The astonishing thing is that Pike's ceiling design reflects precisely the same mysteries observed by David Oveson in this book."
Albert Pike was one of the most prominent 19th century Freemasons. He joined the fraternity, I believe, in 1859, just before the Civil War. He was a scholar of ancient languages, was very familiar with what we would call comparative religion today, and he was given the task by the Supreme Council for the Southern Jurisdiction to rewrite their rituals. And this he did just before the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, he was elected Grand Commander of the Southern Jurisdiction, and he served in that position until his death in, I think, 1891.
Pike held the office of Sovereign Grand Commander for the Southern Jurisdiction, which is based in Washington, D.C. This is the same office that would be later held by Siegfried Kleinknecht. Albert Pike's great contribution to the Scottish Rite is his book, Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. On the title page it reads, "Esoteric Book for Scottish Rite Use Only, to be returned upon withdrawal or death of recipient."
It's given to the new Masons after they've gone through a series of stuff. Then they're given a copy of Albert Pike's book.
Pike declared that the true definition of Freemasonry is an advance toward the light. The question then becomes, what is the light of Masonry? Many believe the answer comes from Pike's own words. In Morals and Dogma, Pike wrote, "Lucifer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Is it he who bears the light? Doubt it not." Masons and their critics will likely agree that these words, perhaps more than any other, continue to haunt Pike's memory. A statue of Albert Pike is located at 3rd and D Streets in downtown Washington, D.C. It was erected by Freemasons in 1901 through an act of Congress. Pike is shown with a maiden beneath him, bearing the standard of the Scottish Rite. More than a century after his death, Albert Pike continues as an important and controversial figure in America's capital. Not only does his statue remain, but he is the central focus of one of Washington, D.C.'s most unique buildings, the Masonic House of the Temple, the headquarters for the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The building was designed by 20th century architect John Russell Pope, who modeled it after the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Pope himself was not a Freemason, so he relied upon the esoteric knowledge of Elliott Woods, a 32nd degree Mason who was the architect of the United States Capitol at the time. The top of the temple is shaped like a step pyramid that some believe parallels the truncated pyramid on the back of the dollar bill.
If you count the courses of masonry on the pyramid, you'll see it has 13 courses of masonry, and that corresponds to the 13 steps on the pyramid that is the roof of the House of the Temple.
Not only is the number 13 present in the roof design, but the House of the Temple is said to be 13 blocks north of the White House, leading some to believe that a secret Masonic signature somehow ties Masonry with the seat of power in American government.
One of the interesting theories put forward about the layout of Washington, D.C. is that the House of the Temple